At 17, she made an insane promise. She would marry a man who didn't even know she existed. Mia Carter was in the audience when she saw Liam Sterling for the first time, a powerful CEO, 15 years older, commanding the stage like he owned the world. In that moment, something inside her awakened. 8 years have passed. Now she's about to enter his company as an employee. He has no idea who she is, but she never forgot the promise she made, and she's willing to do anything to keep it. If this story has already sparked your curiosity, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your support is what motivates us to keep bringing you these stories that touch the heart. Columbia University's auditorium buzzed with an energy that Mia Carter had never felt before. At 17, she felt small among so many college students, but there was something in the atmosphere that made her feel like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She clutched her notebook against her chest, her heart pounding with the typical anxiety of someone who knows they're about to witness something important. "I can't believe we got tickets," whispered Sarah, her friend who had invited her to the event. Everyone wanted to hear this guy speak. Mia barely registered the words. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, waiting. She had spent weeks reading about Liam Sterling, CEO of Sterling Corp., the man who at 32 had revolutionized how the world connected through technology. But it wasn't just his professional achievements that intrigued her. It was something deeper, a curiosity she couldn't name. The lights dimmed, and an expectant silence fell over the auditorium. Then he appeared on stage. The air completely changed. Liam Sterling had the kind of presence that made everyone unconsciously straighten in their seats. Tall with broad shoulders beneath an impeccable navy blue suit, he moved with a natural confidence that commanded attention effortlessly. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and even from a distance Mia could see the intensity in his eyes. "Good evening," his voice echoed through the auditorium, clear and captivating. "You're here because you believe the future can be different, because you know that one idea at the right moment can transform everything." Mia leaned forward, absorbing every word. There was something mesmerizing about the way he spoke. Not just the content, but the genuine passion that came through in every sentence. "Innovation isn't born from formulas or algorithms," he continued, gesturing elegantly. "It's born from the human need for connection, from the hunger to understand and be understood." As he spoke about technology and the future, Mia found herself taking notes furiously, but also observing details that had nothing to do with business. The way he paused to emphasize a point, how his eyes swept across the audience as if he were speaking to each person individually, the expression of intense concentration that crossed his face when he addressed complex topics. "Success," he said, his voice becoming more intimate, "isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the courage to bet on yourself when no one else would." At that moment, something happened that Mia would never forget. Their eyes met across the crowd. It was just an instant, maybe 2 seconds, but she felt as if time had stopped. There was something in that look, an intensity that made her feel like he could see right through her, as if he knew secrets that even she didn't know she was keeping. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "He's looking at you." Mia felt blood rush to her face, but she couldn't look away. When Liam finally continued his presentation, she remained in a trance, processing that momentary connection. The rest of the lecture passed in a haze of admiration and inspiration. Liam spoke about failures that became successes, about the importance of dreaming big, about how the best innovations were born from the audacity to question the status quo. Every word resonated with something deep inside Mia, as if he were articulating thoughts she had carried without being able to express them. "Remember," he concluded, his voice echoing through the now silent auditorium, "the future belongs to those who have enough courage to pursue the impossible, who see opportunity where others see obstacles, who refuse to accept limitations imposed by others." The applause was deafening. Students stood up, shouting and whistling, but Mia remained seated for a moment, absorbing everything she had just heard. Something fundamental had changed inside her that night. It wasn't just professional admiration or academic inspiration. It was a silent promise she made to herself. "What an incredible speech," Sarah commented as the crowd began to disperse. "You look different. Mia turned to her friend, and there was a new determination in her eyes, a resolution that surprised even herself. "Sarah," she said, her voice low but firm, "I'm going to marry him." "What?" Sarah laughed, thinking it was some teenage joke. "Mia, he's a CEO, he must be 30. But Mia wasn't joking. Her hand instinctively went to her purse, where she kept some business cards she had made with her savings, an investment in her future that her parents considered an unnecessary extravagance. Elegant black cards with silver lettering. "Mia Carter, future innovator. I'm going to talk to him," she announced, standing up with a determination that surprised her. "Mia, you can't!" Sarah grabbed her arm. "You can't just approach Liam Sterling." But Mia was already moving through the crowd, her heart racing not with nervousness, but with absolute certainty that she needed to do this. She didn't have an elaborate plan, just the conviction that this moment wouldn't happen again. Backstage was full of important people, journalists, professors, executives, all wanting a few minutes with the speaker. Mia stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment. Her teenage height made her look even younger among all those adults, but her determination kept her steady. Finally, when the crowd dispersed a bit, she approached. "Mr. Sterling?" Her voice came out clearer than she expected. He turned, and again she felt that electric connection. Up close, he was even more impressive, not just because of his height and presence, but because of the details she hadn't noticed from a distance. The way his eyebrows arched slightly when he was thinking, the small lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled frequently, the subtle masculine scent that emanated from him. "Yes?" He smiled, and it was a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. With slightly trembling hands, she extended one of the black cards. "I just wanted you to know that today you changed my perspective on what's possible," she said, her words flowing more naturally than expected. "And someday, when I become the innovator I intend to be, I'll work alongside you." He took the card, and when their fingers briefly touched, Mia felt an electric current run up her arm. Liam examined the card with genuine interest, then looked back at her. "Future innovator," he read aloud, an amused smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's quite ambitious." "Ambition is just the first step," she replied, echoing one of the concepts he had presented. "A very wise man told me that today." Liam laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made Mia's stomach flutter in a strange way. "Touché," he said, studying her face with attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "How old are you?" 17, she answered honestly. "But age has never been a barrier for those with a clear vision of the future." 17, he repeated thoughtfully, and Mia saw something pass through his eyes, maybe surprise, maybe amusement, maybe something she was still too young to fully understand. "You have your whole life ahead of you to conquer the world." "And I will conquer it," she said with a conviction that surprised her, "starting by making you remember me." For a long moment, they looked at each other in silence. There was something in that moment, a mutual understanding that transcended the difference in age and experience. Then he carefully slid the card into the inner pocket of his jacket. "Mia Carter," he said, as if testing the sound of her name on his tongue. "I'll keep this. Promise?" The question came out before she could censor herself. Their eyes met again, and this time there was something different in his look, an intensity that made her heart race in a completely new way. "I never break a promise," he said quietly. And then, before she could respond, he was surrounded again by admirers. But Mia stood there, watching him walk away, knowing with every fiber of her being that this hadn't been just a casual conversation. It had been the beginning of something that would define the rest of her life. As she walked back to where Sarah was waiting for her, a single crystal-clear certainty formed in her mind. She would see him again. And when that happened, she would be impossible to forget. The promise had been made, not just to him, but to herself. 8 years had transformed Mia Carter into everything she had promised to become, and more. At 25, she stood before the imposing glass facade of Sterling Corp, her reflection multiplying infinitely on the mirrored surface. The girl who once nervously clutched a notebook had vanished, replaced by a woman who commanded attention effortlessly. Long auburn hair that caught the morning light, curves that filled her tailored navy blue dress perfectly, and eyes that carried the kind of intelligence that could stop conversations mid-sentence. But beneath the confident facade, her heart hammered against her ribs with the same intensity she had felt 8 years ago. "You've got this, Mia," she whispered to herself, adjusting the strap of her leather portfolio. Inside were her credentials: MIT graduate, summa cum laude, 3 revolutionary patents in digital connectivity, and a recommendation letter that had made Sterling Corp's HR department call her within hours. She had engineered every step that led to this moment. The lobby was a cathedral of modern architecture, high ceilings, marble floors that echoed every footstep, and that same electric feeling she remembered from the auditorium. Employees moved through the space with purpose, their conversations creating a symphony of ambition that made her skin tingle with anticipation. "Mia Carter," a pleasant voice interrupted her observations. A woman in her 30s approached, perfectly polished and professional. "I'm Jennifer from HR. Welcome to Sterling Corp." "Thank you," Mia replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "I'm excited to be here." As they headed to the elevators, Jennifer chatted about company culture and benefits, but Mia's attention was elsewhere. Every corner of this building held the possibility of seeing him again. Would he recognize her? Would he remember that 17-year-old girl who had dared approach him with nothing but audacity and a black business card? The orientation room was on the 15th floor, filled with other new employees who shared the same mixture of excitement and nervousness. Mia took a seat in the back row, her eyes automatically scanning the room for any sign of him, even though logic told her he wouldn't be conducting new employee orientations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jennifer announced, "I know you're all eager to get started, but before we dive into the details, I want you to hear from someone who embodies Sterling Corp's vision." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "Please welcome our CEO, Liam Sterling." The air in the room changed before he even appeared. Then the door opened and time stopped. 8 years had been kind to Liam Sterling. At 40, he possessed the kind of maturity that made men truly devastating. His dark hair now had silver streaks at the temples that only added distinction to his face. His body filled his charcoal suit in a way that suggested hours at the gym, and when he moved to the front of the room, every person present unconsciously straightened up. But it was his eyes that nearly stopped Mia's heart. They still held that same penetrating intensity, that sharp intelligence that could dissect a soul with a glance. "Good morning," his voice filled the space deeper than she remembered, with a velvety quality that sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Welcome to Sterling Corp. You're here because we saw something special in each of you." His eyes methodically swept the room, and Mia felt her entire body tense in anticipation. When his gaze finally reached the back row, when his eyes met hers, nothing. Absolutely nothing. He looked at her exactly as he looked at any other new face in the room, with polite professional interest, but without a flicker of recognition. No pause, no moment of connection that she had relived 1,000 times in her mind. He had completely forgotten. The floor seemed to open up beneath Mia's feet. 8 years of planning, of transforming herself into the woman he couldn't ignore, and he didn't even remember she existed. The 17-year-old girl who had sworn he would remember her forever had been completely erased from his memory. "Innovation," he continued, his attention now focused on other people in the room, "isn't just about technology. It's about understanding the pulse of humanity, about creating connections that matter." The same words, the same passionate tone. But this time, they cut through her like blades, because she now understood that the moment that had changed her entire life had been absolutely insignificant to him. "Each of you was chosen because you possess something unique," he said, gesturing with the same elegant hands she had observed obsessively, "because we see in you the potential to redefine what's possible." Something unique, Mia thought bitterly. Apparently, not that unique after all. "Ms. Carter," Jennifer's voice brought her back to the present. "Would you like to introduce yourself to Mr. Sterling?" Mia's blood froze. Every eye in the room turned to her, including those dark eyes that showed not even a flicker of familiarity. She stood slowly, her legs shaking, but kept her head high. "Mia Carter," she said, her voice clearer than she felt inside. "MIT graduate, specialized in digital connectivity interfaces. I'm here to lead innovation. For a moment that stretched like an eternity, Liam studied her. His eyes traveled over her face and she could see his analytical mind working, as if something familiar was nudging the edges of his consciousness, but he couldn't identify what. "Welcome to the team, Ms. Carter," he said finally, and his voice carried the same professional tone he had used with everyone else. "I look forward to seeing what you can bring to the table." "What I can bring to the table," she repeated mentally, and something inside her hardened. The disappointment and humiliation of the moment began transforming into something more dangerous, pure, relentless determination. If he had forgotten the girl she had been, then she would make sure he could never forget the woman she had become. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she replied, and there was a note in her voice that made his eyes narrow almost imperceptibly. "I guarantee it will be unforgettable." The word choice was deliberate, and she saw how he tilted his head slightly, as if something in that phrase had struck a familiar chord. But before he could analyze the feeling, Jennifer was moving the presentation forward. As he continued speaking to the group, answering questions and sharing insights, Mia remained silent, but her mind was working furiously. Every gesture, every expression, every tone of voice, she was memorizing it all again, but this time with a different purpose. At 17, she had promised she would marry him. Now at 25, with her heart broken but her pride intact, she made a new promise. If Liam Sterling had forgotten who she was, she would make sure he could never forget her again, no matter what it took, no matter how long it would take. The war had just begun, and this time she was no longer a naive teenager with impossible dreams. She was a woman with the skills, intelligence, and determination to get anything she wanted. And she wanted him, more than ever. When the orientation session ended and Liam headed for the door, he stopped for a moment, his eyes meeting hers one last time. This time she didn't look away. She stared right back at him, letting him see the intensity in her eyes, the silent promise she was making. Something passed across his face, confusion perhaps, or recognition that there was more to this new employee than met the eye. But then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his masculine scent, and Mia's absolute certainty that their paths would cross again very soon. And when they did, she would be ready. The conference room on the 22nd floor of Sterling Corp was a temple of glass and steel, where the company's brightest minds gathered to shape the future. Mia adjusted her black silk blouse, feeling the smooth texture against her skin as she organized her notes. 3 weeks had passed since orientation, 3 weeks of silent observation, of learning the company's rhythms, of preparing for this exact moment. Sterling Corp's monthly brainstorming meeting was legendary. It was where ideas were born and died, where careers were built or destroyed in a matter of minutes. And most importantly, it was where Liam Sterling would be present, personally evaluating each proposal. "Nervous?" asked Marcus, a teammate, sliding into the chair next to her. He was smart, ambitious, and had made his interest in Mia clear since her first day. "Your first presentation to the big boss." "Prepared," she corrected, and there was a confidence in her voice that made Marcus reconsider the casual comment he was about to make. The door opened, and Liam entered the room like a force of nature. Today he wore a charcoal grey suit that molded perfectly to his athletic body, the dark blue tie making his eyes seem even more penetrating. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his fingers through it while analyzing reports, and there was something about that calculated imperfection that made Mia's pulse quicken. "Good morning," his voice filled the space, and immediately all side conversations ceased. "I hope you're bringing something game-changing today. The competition isn't sleeping." His eyes swept the table, pausing briefly on Mia before moving on. No recognition, just the same polite professional interest. But she noticed how his fingers drummed once on the table when he looked at her. An unconscious tick that suggested something about her presence made him slightly uneasy. The first presentations were solid, but predictable. Incremental improvements to existing systems, interface optimizations, market analyses that said nothing new. Liam listened politely, asked sharp questions that left some presenters sweating, but Mia could tell from his body language that nothing had captured his real attention. "Next," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Ms. Carter, I believe." "Yes, sir." Mia stood with fluid grace, her heels echoing against the floor as she moved to the front of the room. She had chosen every piece of her outfit carefully: the black blouse that highlighted her green eyes, the pencil skirt that accentuated her curves without being inappropriate for the professional setting, the subtle perfume that left a trail when she moved. "No slides today?" Liam asked, an eyebrow arching slightly when she didn't head to the computer. "It's not for this," Mia replied, and there was something in her voice, a controlled intimacy, that made everyone in the room lean forward without realizing it. "Because what I'm going to propose can't be captured in charts or numbers. It has to be felt." His eyes narrowed slightly, and she saw the exact moment when his complete attention focused on her. It was like being caught in a spotlight, intense and a little dangerous. "Continue," he said, and his voice had lost its casual tone. Now there was real expectation there. Mia took a deep breath, letting a moment of silence build, creating tension. "How many of you felt truly connected to someone yesterday?" The question caught everyone off guard. Glances were exchanged around the table. "I'm talking about real connection," she continued, walking slowly around the table, her movements deliberate and mesmerizing. "Not text messages, not likes on posts, not rushed video calls. I'm talking about the moment when you look into someone's eyes and feel like your soul is being seen." Liam had leaned back in his chair, but his posture was tense, like a predator watching potential prey. His eyes followed her every movement. "We live in the age of hyperconnectivity," Mia said, stopping directly in front of him, her hands resting on the table. "But we've never been so profoundly lonely. We have thousands of digital connections, but how many soul connections? And your proposal is—" Liam's voice was low, controlled, but there was an intensity behind it that sent warmth spreading through Mia's chest. "Digital intimacy," she said, and the way she pronounced the words, slowly savoring each syllable, made something pass through his eyes. "A platform that doesn't just connect people, but creates true emotional intimacy through technology." "Intimacy," he repeated, and there was something in the way his tongue formed the word that made Mia's stomach tighten. "Define that." She smiled, a smile that had layers of meaning. The ability to be completely vulnerable with someone and feel safe doing it. The feeling that someone truly understands who you are beyond the masks we wear every day. "And how exactly do you propose to commoditize that?" There was a challenge in his voice now, but also genuine curiosity. "Through empathy algorithms," Mia replied, and now she was clearly in her element. "AI that learns not just what you say, but how you feel when you say it. That recognizes emotional patterns, that identifies when you're hiding pain behind a smile, when you're desperately needing someone who will truly listen." She saw when it clicked for him. The moment when he realized this wasn't just a product idea, it was something deeply personal, something that came from a place of true human need. "Empathy as a service," she said softly, and the words seemed to float in the air between them. "Because at the end of the day, Mr. Sterling, we're not in the technology business. We're in the business of making people feel less alone in the world." The silence in the room was absolute. Other employees looked between Mia and Liam like tennis match spectators, feeling the tension in the air, but not fully understanding its nature. Liam leaned forward slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you believe you can teach machines to feel?" "Not to feel," Mia corrected, and her voice became even softer, more intimate. "But to recognize when humans are feeling, to respond in ways that make sense, to create safe spaces for real vulnerability." "Vulnerability," he murmured, as if testing the word. "That's dangerous territory, Ms. Carter." "All the best innovations are," she replied, and there was a double meaning in her words that didn't go unnoticed. "The question is, do you have enough courage to explore it?" For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, they looked at each other across the table. There was something happening here, something that transcended normal professional dynamics. Others in the room could feel it, an electricity, a tension that made the air seem charged. "Interesting," Liam said finally, and his voice was huskier than before. "Very provocative." The word choice made Mia's heart race. There were layers of meaning there, messages being communicated through subtext that only the two of them fully understood. "Provocative is the goal," she replied, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. After all, if we're not provoking reactions, we're not really connecting. And what about technical viability? Marcus interrupted, clearly sensing he was missing something important in the dynamic between them. Emotional AI is still in very early stages. Mia turned to him, but Liam answered first. "Let me worry about technical viability," he said, his voice carrying an authority that immediately silenced any objection. His eyes returned to Mia. "Continue." "The technology exists," she said, turning her full attention back to Liam. "Emotional pattern recognition, real-time sentiment analysis, adaptive interfaces that respond to the user's emotional state. What's missing is the vision to put them together meaningfully. And you have that vision." There was a challenge in his question, but also something more. A personal curiosity that went beyond professional interest. "I live that vision every day," she replied, and for the first time she allowed real vulnerability to show in her voice. "Because I know what it's like to be in a room full of people and feel completely invisible. I know what it's like to have something important to say and feel like no one is really listening." Something passed across Liam's face. Recognition, perhaps, or empathy. For a moment, his defenses seemed to lower slightly. "We all know that," he said softly, and there was an intimacy in his voice that made everyone in the room feel like intruders in a private conversation. "Exactly," Mia whispered. "What if we could change that? What if we could create technology that truly saw people, that made them feel heard, understood, valued?" "That would be..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Revolutionary," she completed. "Dangerous," he corrected, but there was admiration in his voice. "Because once you teach people to expect true intimacy, they never settle for superficial connections again." Their eyes met again, and this time there was something different in how he looked at her. No longer polite professional interest, but something deeper, more personal. "Maybe it's time people stopped settling," she said. And though she was talking about technology, both understood that the conversation had transcended professional boundaries long ago. Liam leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced as he studied her. "Project approved," he said finally, "but with conditions." Mia's heart leaped. "What conditions?" "Direct supervision, weekly reports, and..." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Complete transparency about your methods and motivations." There was something in the way he said motivations that made Mia understand he suspected there was more behind her proposal than pure professional interest. "Complete transparency," she agreed, and there was a challenge in her voice. "As long as it works both ways." A smile, small but real, touched the corners of his mouth. "We'll see just how far your audacity really goes, Ms. Carter." And as the meeting dissolved around them, as other employees left the room commenting on the presentation, Liam and Mia remained looking at each other, both understanding that something fundamental had changed. The war had transformed into something more complex, more dangerous, and neither was sure who was hunting whom. The message appeared on Mia's screen at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday. "My office, now. LS." Just 4 words, but enough to make her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in 3 weeks, since the presentation that had changed everything. 3 weeks of formal emails about Project Prometheus, 3 weeks of professional meetings with other team members present, 3 weeks of loaded glances across conference rooms that never transformed into something more. But now, finally, they were alone. Liam's office occupied an entire corner of the 30th floor, its glass windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan that at night transformed into a galaxy of twinkling lights. Mia knocked on the dark mahogany door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Come in." She turned the handle and entered, her heels sinking into the Persian rug as she absorbed the space that was so quintessentially him. Walls lined with books, an oak desk that could easily accommodate 12 people, and the subtle scent of his masculine cologne mixed with leather and something indefinably dangerous. Liam was standing near the window, hands in his pockets, tie loosened, and the first 2 buttons of his shirt open. There was something in his posture, a contained tension, that made Mia realize he had been waiting for this moment as much as she had. "Close the door," he said, without turning around. The click of the lock echoed in the silence like a gunshot, and Mia felt as if she had just crossed an invisible line. Now they were truly alone, without witnesses, without the protection of professional environments. "Have a seat," he said, finally turning to face her. But Mia remained standing, her instinct telling her that sitting would be a position of disadvantage. Instead, she approached slowly, her eyes never leaving his until she stood on the other side of the desk. "Project Prometheus," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I approved it because it's brilliant, but also because—" He paused, as if carefully weighing his next words. "Because there's something about you that makes me uneasy." "Uneasy," Mia repeated, and there was a provocative note in her voice. "In what way?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "You know in what way." The air between them seemed electrified, charged with a tension that had been building for weeks. Mia placed her palms on the desk, leaning slightly forward, a movement that was both professional and subtly seductive. "Maybe you could be more specific," she said, and her voice had become softer, more intimate. Liam approached slowly, walking around the desk until he stood directly in front of her. This close, she could see the details that made her breathless, the small lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble at the end of the day, the way his lips curved when he was thinking intensely. "There's something familiar about you," he said, his words almost a whisper, "as if we knew each other from another place, another time." Mia's heart nearly stopped. Was he remembering? After all these weeks, were fragments of memory finally surfacing? "Maybe in another life," she said carefully, testing how far she could go without revealing the truth. "Maybe," he murmured, but there was skepticism in his voice. "Or maybe you're just exceptionally good at making people feel like they're special." The accusation hit her like a slap. He thought she was manipulating him, playing some kind of calculated game. And while technically he wasn't wrong, the cold way he said it made her feel as if she had been stripped naked and judged. "Is that what you think of me?" she asked, her voice carrying a real vulnerability that surprised her. "That I'm some kind of manipulator?" Something passed through his eyes, surprise perhaps at the honesty in her voice. "I don't know what to think of you," he admitted, "and that puts me at a disadvantage." "Good," she said, recovering her confidence, "because advantage is overrated." A smile, small but genuine, touched the corners of his mouth. "You're dangerous, Mia Carter." The way he said her name, slowly, savoring each syllable, sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "Dangerous how?" "The kind that makes smart men make stupid decisions," he replied, moving even closer. Now they were so close she could feel the heat emanating from his body, could see how his breathing had become slightly faster. The desk was behind her, effectively trapping her, but she didn't feel cornered. She felt excited. "And what kind of stupid decisions are you considering?" she asked, her voice little more than a whisper. Instead of answering with words, he slowly extended his hand, his fingers brushing her face with a lightness that made her shiver. The touch was electric, sending waves of heat through every nerve ending. "This one," he murmured, his voice hoarse. For a moment they remained frozen like that, his hand caressing her face, their eyes connected in an intensity that made the air around them seem charged. Mia could feel her own pulse racing, could see the conflict in his eyes between what he wanted and what he knew he should do. "Liam," she whispered, and the sound of his first name on her lips seemed to break the last thread of his resistance. He leaned in, his lips almost touching hers, his breath mingling with hers. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her mouth. "No," she replied, her hands moving to his chest, feeling the tense muscles beneath the cotton shirt. "I won't do that." The low groan that escaped his throat was almost primal. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him, and she could feel every hard line of his body pressed against her soft curves. "This is madness," he murmured, but his actions contradicted his words as one of his hands tangled in her hair. "The best innovation always is," she whispered back. They were millimeters from kissing when the elevator chimed in the hallway, followed by voices approaching the office. Reality hit them like cold water. Liam pulled away quickly, running his hands through his hair in an attempt to compose himself. Mia straightened up, her hands smoothing her blouse in an attempt to look professional again, even though her entire body was vibrating with unsatisfied desire. "Mr. Sterling?" His assistant's voice echoed through the door. "The documents for tomorrow's meeting are ready." "One moment," he called back, his voice remarkably controlled for someone who seconds before had been about to kiss his employee in his office. He turned to Mia, and there was something new in his eyes. Desire, yes, but also a dangerous determination. "Monday," he said, his voice low and intense. "We're launching Project Prometheus, direct supervision, like I said." "Direct supervision," she repeated, and both understood that the words carried meaning far beyond the professional. "And Mia," he said as she headed for the door. "Yes? The next time we're alone like this." He paused, his dark eyes traveling over her body in a way that made her feel like she was burning from the inside. "There won't be any interruptions." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Mia smiled, a smile that had layers of anticipation and challenge. "I'm counting on it." She left the office with trembling legs, but with absolute certainty that she had won an important battle. Liam Sterling had finally shown his cards, had admitted that she affected him in ways that went far beyond the professional. Now the only question was, who would surrender first to the fire burning between them? And as she waited for the elevator, Mia touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of the almost kiss that had changed everything. Monday couldn't come soon enough. The game had officially begun, and this time both knew exactly what was at stake. Project Prometheus's development room had become the stage for a dangerous dance. For 3 weeks, Liam and Mia met there every morning at 8 a.m., officially to review the project's progress, but in reality to continue the seduction game that had begun in his office. It was a Tuesday when the tension finally reached its breaking point. Mia arrived at the room wearing a grey knit dress that hugged every curve of her body like a second skin, her hair loose and falling in waves over her shoulders. She knew exactly the effect it would have. She had chosen the outfit thinking of Liam's dark eyes, traveling over every line of her silhouette. He was already there, studying code on the giant screen, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms that made her mouth go dry. There was something primitively attractive about seeing him work. The intense concentration, the way his muscles tensed when he leaned forward, the strong line of his jaw when he frowned. "Good morning," she said, closing the door behind her. He turned and she saw the exact moment when his eyes registered her dress, the way his breathing became slightly faster. "Mia." His voice was rougher than normal. She approached the work table, very aware of how her heels echoed in the silence, of how he followed every movement with eyes that seemed to devour every inch of her. "How are the emotional recognition algorithms?" she asked, leaning against the table next to him, close enough for him to smell her perfume. "Problematic," he replied, but his attention was clearly divided between the screen and her proximity. "The patterns aren't aligning as they should." Mia leaned over him to get a better look at the screen, her arm brushing against his, her hair sweeping across his shoulder. She felt how he stiffened at the touch, how his breathing became irregular. "Here," she said softly, her finger tracing lines of code on the screen, very aware of how her breasts pressed against his arm. "The problem is in how we're interpreting micro-expressions. It needs to be more intuitive." "Intuitive," he repeated, and there was a tension in his voice that had nothing to do with programming. "Yes," she whispered, turning slightly so their faces were inches apart. "Sometimes you need to feel what's beneath the surface, not just analyze the obvious." His eyes fixed on her lips, and for a moment she thought he would finally kiss her right there, but then he pulled away abruptly, running his hands through his hair in an attempt to compose himself. "You're doing this on purpose," he said, his voice loaded with accusation and desire. "Doing what?" she asked innocently, but there was a provocative smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You know exactly what," he replied, approaching her with slow, deliberate steps. "Every movement, every word, every—" His eyes traveled over her body. "Every outfit you choose." Mia felt warmth spread through her body under his intense gaze. "Maybe you're imagining things." "Am I imagining?" He moved even closer, until she could feel the heat emanating from his body. "Am I imagining the way you look at me during meetings, the way you find excuses to touch me when you're explaining something? And if you're not imagining," she challenged, lifting her chin in a mixture of defiance and invitation, "what are you going to do about it?" For a moment, the tension between them was so palpable it seemed like the air might ignite. His eyes darkened with a desire he was no longer trying to hide, and Mia felt her body react with an intensity that surprised her. "This," he murmured, his hands bracing on the table on either side of her, effectively trapping her between his arms. Mia's heart raced as she found herself cornered between his hard body and the cold table. He was so close, she could see the small golden flecks in his dark eyes, could feel his warm breath against her face. "You shouldn't play with fire, Mia," he whispered, his voice rough with contained desire. "What if I want to get burned?" she whispered back, her hands moving instinctively to his chest, feeling the tense muscles beneath his shirt. The low groan that escaped his throat was almost primal. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "Then show me," she challenged, her eyes shining with a mixture of desire and determination. He leaned even closer, his lips almost touching hers, his breath mingling with hers. "You want to know what you do to me?" he murmured against her mouth. "You make me forget all the rules, all the reasons why this is a terrible idea." "Good," she whispered, her nails lightly scratching through his shirt. "Because rules are meant to be broken." He laughed, a low, dangerous sound that made her stomach contract with desire. "You're impossible. And you're in love with it," she shot back. The word love seemed to ring like an alarm between them. It was the first time either of them had used such a loaded word, and both felt its weight in the air. Liam pulled back slightly, his eyes studying her face with new intensity. "You think you know what I feel?" "I know you feel something," she replied, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. "The same way I feel." "And what do you feel?" The question came out as a rough whisper. For a moment, Mia considered giving a safe answer, something that would keep the game going without revealing too much. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability hidden behind all that intensity, that made her want to be honest. "I feel like I've spent my whole life waiting for you," she said softly. "Like every experience, every choice, led me to this moment, to you." The raw confession clearly affected him. She saw how his eyes softened, how his defenses lowered for a fraction of a second before composing themselves again. "Mia," he began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Reality hit them like a cold shower. They separated quickly, Liam heading to the computer screen while Mia fixed her hair and tried to look professional. The door opened, and Dorothy Mitchell, the operations director, entered with her aura of icy efficiency. At 50, she had the kind of presence that made entire rooms fall silent, and Mia had always suspected there was something more than professional interest in the way Dorothy looked at Liam. "Liam," Dorothy said, her eyes scanning the room and noting the tension in the air. "We need to talk about the quarterly reports." "Of course," he replied, his voice remarkably controlled. "Mia was just showing me some improvements to the algorithms." The look Dorothy directed at Mia was cold and evaluative. "I'm sure it was very educational." There was poison in how she said educational, and Mia immediately understood she had an enemy. Dorothy had sensed the tension between them, and clearly didn't approve. "Very educational," Mia confirmed, her smile sweet as poisoned honey. "Mr. Sterling is a very hands-on teacher." The deliberate word choice made Dorothy's eyes narrow dangerously. "I'm sure. Well, perhaps it's time for you to get back to your work, Ms. Carter. I'm sure there's plenty to do." It was clearly a dismissal, but Mia didn't move. Instead, she looked at Liam, waiting for him to take a stand. "Actually," Liam said, and there was a firmness in his voice that made Dorothy straighten, "Mia needs to stay. The project requires constant supervision." The look Dorothy directed between them could have melted steel. "Very well. But remember, Liam, that appropriate supervision is essential to maintaining the company's reputation." The threat was subtle, but clear. Dorothy knew something was happening and was prepared to use it against them if necessary. "Of course," Liam replied, his voice neutral. "Sterling Corp's reputation is always my priority." After Dorothy left, the silence that followed was charged with tension of a different kind. The implicit threat had changed the dynamic, adding an element of real danger to what was between them. "She knows," Mia said finally. "She suspects," Liam corrected, "which is different, but it also means we need to be more careful." "Or," Mia said, approaching him again, "we can stop caring what she thinks." "Mia," he said, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. "Tell me you don't feel this," she said, placing her hand over his heart, feeling the rapid beats through his shirt. "Tell me this is just my imagination." He covered her hand with his, pressing it against his chest. "You know I can't." "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. For a long moment they stayed like that, their hands intertwined over his heart, their eyes connected in an intimacy that transcended anything purely physical. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he said finally. "Maybe not," she admitted, "but I know I want to get into it with you." He laughed, a low sound full of admiration. "God, you're impossible to resist." "Then stop trying," she whispered against his lips. And this time, when he leaned in to kiss her, nothing interrupted them. The meeting had been scheduled for 6 p.m. on a Thursday, well after business hours, when Sterling Corp's hallways would be empty and they could work without interruptions. At least, that was the official excuse. Mia entered the 28th floor conference room, wearing a black dress that hugged every curve like a silent promise, her hair pinned up in a bun that left her neck provocatively exposed. 3 weeks had passed since that first kiss that had changed everything. 3 weeks of secret meetings, stolen touches, and sexual tension that was becoming impossible to ignore. Liam was already there, standing before the panoramic window, watching the city lights come alive like fallen stars. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned the first 2 buttons of his shirt, a sight that never failed to make Mia's heart race. "You're late," he said without turning around, but there was amusement in his voice. "Traffic was terrible," she lied, knowing perfectly well that he knew she had been late on purpose, just to see him waiting for her. He finally turned, and the look he gave her was so intense she felt like she was burning from the inside. "We have work to do." "Of course," she agreed, approaching the table where documents were scattered, but her eyes never left his. "The project is progressing well." "It is," he said, but his attention was clearly elsewhere, on the way she moved, the curve of her lips, the subtle perfume she wore just for him. For an hour, they tried to maintain the professional facade, reviewing code and discussing improvements to the algorithms. But the tension in the air was palpable, every accidental touch of fingers sending electric shocks through both of them, every prolonged glance loaded with unfulfilled promises. It was when Mia questioned one of the technical decisions that everything fell apart. "I don't understand why you're insisting on this approach," she said, her professional frustration mixing with the sexual tension that had been building for weeks. "The project is lacking soul." Liam stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "Lacking soul?" "Yes," she insisted, standing up from her chair, her emotions finally overflowing. "You're treating emotional connection like a cold algorithm, as if it were just data to be processed. But that's not how it works." "And how exactly do you know how it works?" he asked, his voice becoming dangerously low. "Because I live it every day." The words came out before she could censor herself. "Because I know what it's like to have something true, something real, and have to hide it behind reports and meetings, and pretend it's just professional." They stared at each other across the table, both breathing heavily, the truth finally exposed between them. "Mia," he said, his voice softer now. "No," she interrupted, walking around the table, all caution abandoned. "You want to talk about lacking soul? What's soul about pretending we don't feel what we feel, about acting like there's only work between us?" He approached her, and this time there was no hesitation in his movements. "You think this is easy for me? You think it doesn't kill me to have to pretend you're just another employee? Then stop pretending," she challenged, her chest rising and falling with emotion. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because," he said, his hands moving to hold her face, "because once I stop pretending, there's no going back." "Good," she whispered, her hands resting on his chest. "Because I don't want to go back." He studied her for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail of her face. Then suddenly he pulled away, walking to his desk and opening a drawer. "There's something you need to know," he said, his back still turned to her. "Liam?" When he turned around, he was holding something small and black in his hands. Mia's heart stopped when she recognized what it was. Her card, the card she had given him 8 years ago. "Mia Carter, future innovator," he read aloud, his eyes meeting hers. "You were wearing a navy blue dress, Your hair was shorter then, but your eyes—" He paused. "Your eyes were exactly the same." Mia felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "You remembered. I always remembered. But when I started here, you acted like I didn't know you." He approached again, the card still in his hands. "Because I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That the woman who showed up at my company was the same girl who gave me this card with such confidence, such certainty that our paths would cross again." Mia's legs failed her, and she leaned against the table behind her. "You knew all along." "I knew there was something familiar, yes. But it took me a few weeks to be sure. And when I was—" He smiled, a smile that was part amusement, part admiration. "I was impressed. You really did it. You really became impossible to forget. Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice was little more than a whisper. "Because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to know if the woman was as determined as the girl had been." Mia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All the anguish of the past weeks, all the uncertainty about whether he remembered her, all the fear that she was just another employee to him. "You're a sadist," she said finally. "I'm many things," he admitted, approaching until he was directly in front of her. "But I could never forget the 17-year-old girl who had the audacity to give me a card and promise she would become unforgettable." "And?" she asked, her heart beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "And you kept your promise," he said softly, his hands moving to hold her face. "You became absolutely unforgettable." "Liam," she whispered, his name coming out like a prayer. 8 years, he murmured, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "For 8 years I carried this card, wondering if you would really appear in my life again. And now I'm here. Now you're here," he confirmed. "And I no longer have the strength to pretend you don't mean everything to me. How long were you going to keep this to yourself?" she asked, her hands moving to cover his. "I kept it for 8 years, he said, his lips curving into a smile that was pure predatory masculinity. "But now that you're here, now that you're mine—" "Yours," she interrupted, an eyebrow arching. "Mine," he confirmed, and there was a possessiveness in his voice that made her stomach contract with desire. "Because one thing I learned in these 8 years, Mia, when something is truly valuable, you don't let it slip away twice. And if I don't want to be yours," she challenged, even though every cell in her body was screaming the opposite. "Then," he said, leaning until his lips almost touched hers, "I'll have to persuade you." "How do you plan to do that?" Instead of answering with words, he finally closed the distance between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was everything she had imagined and more. It was possessive, desperate, full of 8 years of accumulated tension and promises finally fulfilled. When they finally separated, both were breathless. "Persuasive," she admitted, her fingers tracing the contours of his face. "And that was just the beginning," he promised, his eyes darkening with an intensity that made her entire body vibrate with anticipation. "Liam? Yes? Next time you keep a secret for 8 years, maybe you could tell me a little sooner." He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that echoed through the empty room. "I love you, Mia Carter. I always have, from the moment that audacious girl gave me a black card and promised she would become unforgettable." The words she had waited 8 years to hear were finally spoken, and she felt like her heart might explode with happiness. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "I always have." And finally, after 8 years of waiting, the promise was complete. Liam's loft in Soho was a revelation. Mia stopped at the entrance, absorbing the space that was so quintessentially him, exposed brick walls, enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, and an atmosphere of sophisticated masculinity that made her heart race. But more than the decor, it was the intimacy of the moment that left her breathless. Finally, they were completely alone, without the barriers of the office, without the roles of boss and employee. "Welcome to my sanctuary," Liam said, closing the door behind them. He had changed from his suit into dark jeans and a grey Henley that hugged his torso devastatingly. Seeing him like this, casual, relaxed, human, made something tighten in her chest. "It's beautiful," she said, walking to the windows that offered a spectacular view of the city. But when she turned, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "Not as beautiful as you," he said, approaching slowly, like a predator who finally had his prey exactly where he wanted her. Mia had changed from her work dress into jeans that molded her curves perfectly, and a green silk blouse that highlighted her eyes. But under his gaze, she felt naked, exposed, desired, in a way that made her vibrate inside. "Liam," she began, but he silenced her by placing a finger over her lips. "No," he said softly. "No more, Mr. Sterling. No more formalities. Here, now, it's just us." The intimacy of his words, the implicit promise, made her legs tremble. "Just us," she repeated, and there was something liberating about saying it. He approached until their bodies almost touched, his hands moving to hold her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "Do you know how long I've dreamed of this? Having you here without interruptions, without the need to pretend." "How long?" she whispered, her hands resting on his chest, feeling the tense muscles beneath the soft shirt. "Since that night, 8 years ago, when a 17-year-old girl had the audacity to tell me she would be unforgettable." His words hit her like a physical caress. "And now?" "Now," he murmured, leaning until his lips almost touched hers. "I'm going to show you exactly how unforgettable you've become." The kiss was different from all they had shared before. Unhurried, without fear of being interrupted, it was a slow and devastating exploration that made every nerve ending in Mia awaken. Her hands tangled in his hair as he deepened the kiss, his tongue dancing with hers in a symphony of desire that left her dizzy. "God, Mia," he groaned against her lips, his hands sliding down the curve of her back, pulling her closer. "You have no idea what you do to me." "Then show me," she whispered, her nails lightly scratching through his shirt, feeling him shiver under her touch. With a fluid movement, he lifted her in his arms and she wrapped her legs around his waist, laughing softly at the feeling of safety and excitement it gave her. He carried her to the leather sofa, placing her gently, but his eyes never left hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hands caressing her face with a tenderness that almost made her cry. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back," she completed, echoing the words he had said weeks ago. "I know. And I want to cross this line with you." Something passed through his eyes. Relief, desire, love, all mixed in an intensity that made her feel like she was drowning in him. "I love you," he said, the words coming out like a rough confession. "I love your brilliant mind, your impossible determination, the way you challenge everything around you." "I love you too," she replied, pulling him down until he was braced above her, the weight of his body a delicious promise. "I always have." What followed was a symphony of touches, whispers, and discoveries. Liam worshipped her with a reverence that made her feel precious, his hands and mouth exploring every inch of skin as if it were sacred territory. When he finally possessed her completely, Mia felt like she was being recreated, every cell in her body vibrating at a frequency she didn't know existed. Later, when they were entwined on the sofa, breathing still irregular, Mia traced lazy circles on his bare chest, marveling at the reality of finally being there, skin against skin, heart against heart. "What are you thinking about?" Liam asked, his voice hoarse from the love they had just made. "How surreal this is," she admitted. "Part of me still can't believe this is real." He laughed softly, the sound vibrating through his chest. "Believe it. Very real. And I'm not going to let you forget it." To prove his point, he pulled her up, kissing her with renewed passion that made her melt against him. "You're dangerous," she whispered against his lips. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I didn't even know I wanted." "Like what?" She braced herself on her elbows, studying his face in the golden light of dusk. "Like a future. Like mornings waking up next to you. Like—" she hesitated. "Like what?" he insisted gently. "Like a life that's ours, not just stolen in moments between meetings." His expression softened and he caressed her face with a tenderness that made her want to cry. "Mia, you don't have to say anything now," she interrupted. "I know it's complicated. I know there are consequences." "Dorothy," he said, the name coming out like a curse. "Dorothy," she confirmed, "and the company, and people who will say I got my position by sleeping with the boss." You know that's not true. I know, but others don't. They fell silent for a moment, the weight of reality seeping into their perfect bubble. Then Liam sat up, pulling her into his lap. I don't care, he said, his voice firm. I don't care about Dorothy, about gossip, about any of it. I waited 8 years for you, Mia. I'm not going to waste more time worrying about what others think. Liam, no, he interrupted her. Listen, you transformed my company, my life, my entire world. And if some people have a problem with that, it's their problem, not ours. The conviction in his voice made her believe, at least in that moment, that maybe it was possible. That maybe they could have this real, true love without hiding. What if we're wrong? She asked, her greatest vulnerability finally exposed. He held her face in his hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. What if we're right? What if this is exactly what we were both looking for without knowing it? The possibility filled her with hope so intense it hurt. Do you really believe that? I believe in you, he said simply. I believe in us. She kissed him then, pouring all her love, all her hope, all her fear into that kiss. When they separated, both were breathless again. Stay with me tonight, he asked, and there was a vulnerability in his voice she rarely heard. Stay with me and let the rest of the world disappear for now. Yes, she whispered, nestling against him. Yes. They spent the night exploring each other in every possible way, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Liam made her feel things she didn't even know were possible, and she saw how he surrendered completely to her, his defenses totally lowered for the first time. In the early morning, when she finally fell asleep in his arms, Liam stayed awake watching her, stroking her hair as if she were something too precious to be real. You're dangerous, he whispered to the darkness, echoing her own words, because you make me want to forget who I was before you. But unlike his earlier words, now that didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a promise. And the next morning, when Mia woke up in his arms with Manhattan's sun filtering through the huge windows, she knew there was no going back. Not that she wanted there to be. The war was over. Love had won. Now they just had to figure out how to navigate what came next. The executive board meeting room had never seemed so intimidating. Mia adjusted her black blazer, her fingers trembling imperceptibly as she organized her notes for the final presentation of Project Prometheus. 3 months of intensive development had culminated in this moment, official approval for launch, which would determine not only the project's future, but possibly her career at Sterling Corp. Across the polished mahogany table, Dorothy Mitchell sat like a queen on her throne, her cold eyes studying Mia with a surgeon's precision, searching for weaknesses. At 52, Dorothy possessed the kind of icy beauty that had been sharpened by decades of ruthless corporate politics. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a perfect bun, and her grey Armani suit conveyed absolute authority. Before we begin, Dorothy said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversations, I'd like to express some concerns about this project. Mia felt her stomach tighten. Beside her, she felt Liam stiffen almost imperceptibly, though his face remained a mask of professional neutrality. What kind of concerns? Liam asked, his voice measured. Dorothy smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, for starters, the budget has exceeded initial projections by 20%. And then there's the matter of the very close supervision this project has received. The last part was said with a tone that made it clear exactly what she was insinuating. Glances were exchanged around the table as the other executives caught the subtext. Close supervision ensures quality, Liam replied coldly. And budget overruns are justifiable considering the potential returns. Ah, yes, Dorothy continued, leafing through some papers in front of her. Speaking of quality, I did my own analysis of the project, and I must say I'm questioning whether this is truly commercially viable. Mia felt her blood turn to ice. Dorothy had done her own analysis? When? And more importantly, for what purpose? Ms. Carter, Dorothy addressed her directly, her eyes like lasers. Could you explain to us exactly how you plan to monetize emotional intimacy? The question was designed to be a trap, and Mia knew it. But 3 months working side by side with Liam had sharpened her perception, and she recognized the tactic for what it was. an attempt to destabilize her publicly. "With pleasure," Mia replied, standing with a grace she didn't feel inside. No slides, no visual aids, just her conviction and intelligence as weapons. "But first, Mrs. Mitchell, I'd like to know what data you based your analysis on." "Data?" Dorothy seemed slightly caught off guard by the direct question. "Yes. You see, Project Prometheus involves proprietary algorithms and highly classified security protocols. So I'm curious about how you gained access to the technical data necessary to conduct a comprehensive analysis." A tense silence fell over the room. Dorothy had just been accused, very diplomatically, of either not having done a real analysis or of having obtained information through inappropriate channels. "I have access to all company projects," Dorothy replied, but there was a defensive stiffness in her voice. "Of course you do," Mia agreed softly. "So I'm sure you saw the engagement numbers from our beta testing. 93% user retention after 30 days. That's revolutionary in our sector." "Numbers can be interpreted in various ways," Dorothy countered. "True," Mia smiled, a smile with teeth. "Just as motivations behind criticism can be interpreted in various ways." The implicit accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Everyone in the room understood that war had been declared, and the weapons weren't just numbers and charts. "Perhaps," Dorothy said, her voice becoming dangerously low, "we should focus on what really matters. This project was born from a very specific dynamic between supervisor and supervised. This raises questions about objectivity and appropriate decision-making." The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy had played her most powerful card, the open insinuation about the relationship between Mia and Liam. Mia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach, but forced herself to maintain composure. From the corner of her eye, she saw Liam stiffen, his hands clenching into fists on the table. "Mrs. Mitchell," Mia said, her voice clear as cut crystal, "if you have specific accusations to make about inappropriate professional conduct, I suggest you make them formally through appropriate channels. Otherwise, I suggest we keep our discussion focused on the project's merits." "Oh, but the merits are intrinsically linked to the process, aren't they?" Dorothy pressed. "How can we be sure decisions were based on pure merit when there are complicating factors involved?" It was Liam who finally spoke, his voice sharp as a blade. "Dorothy, if you have something specific to say, say it. Otherwise, I suggest you allow Ms. Carter to present her work." "My work," Mia said, her voice gaining strength, "speaks for itself. But since Mrs. Mitchell has raised questions about process, let me be crystal clear about something." She turned to face Dorothy directly, her green eyes blazing with an intensity that made several executives lean forward. "I didn't come to Sterling Corp looking for favors or shortcuts. I came with a vision that can transform how people connect in the digital world. If that bothers some people, if that challenges the status quo, then I'm doing my job correctly." "And what about your closeness to certain people in positions of authority?" Dorothy pressed, determined to force an admission. Mia smiled, a smile that was pure feminine confidence. "My closeness to any colleague is based on mutual respect, shared vision, and professional excellence. If some people interpret that as something more, perhaps it says more about their own insecurities than about my conduct." The response was a surgical strike, and Dorothy recoiled as if she'd been physically hit. "Furthermore," Mia continued, now clearly in command of the room, "I'd like to remind everyone that we're here to discuss a project that could revolutionize our industry. A project that could generate over $100 million in revenue in the first year and establish Sterling Corp as the absolute leader in emotional connection technology." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "But if some prefer to focus on internal politics instead of revolutionary innovation, perhaps that explains why our competition has been gaining ground." The blow was accurate. Everyone in the room knew that Dorothy had been responsible for losing important contracts in recent months. "You're too young to understand the complexities of corporate politics," Dorothy said, her mask of professionalism finally slipping. "And you're perhaps too trapped in the past to recognize the future when it knocks on your door," Mia shot back without hesitation. The silence in the room was absolute. Two women, two generations, two business philosophies in open warfare. It was Liam who finally broke the silence. "The project is approved," he said, his voice carrying final authority. Implementation begins Monday. Dorothy turned to him, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Liam, I hope you're not letting personal considerations influence business decisions. I'm letting results influence business decisions, he replied. Something that should be familiar to everyone in this room. The meeting dissolved into side conversations, but the damage was done. The war between Mia and Dorothy had been officially declared, and everyone knew there would be consequences. As the executives filed out of the room, Dorothy approached Mia, her voice low and full of venom. You think you won something here today, she whispered, but this is far from over. I built this company as much as Liam did, and I won't let an ambitious little girl destroy everything. Mia turned to face her, not a trace of fear in her eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came to build the future. If that threatens you, maybe it's time to question whether you're still part of that future. Dorothy left the room like a storm, leaving only Mia and Liam alone. That was, Liam began. War, Mia completed, and she won't stop here. I know, he said, approaching her. Are you sure you're ready for this? Mia looked through the windows at the city she had conquered, then turned her eyes to the man who had become her world. I was born ready for this, she said. The question is, are you ready to fight beside me? He smiled, a smile that was pure masculine admiration. Mia, I'd fight the whole world for you. Good, she said, leaning in to kiss him softly. Because I think we're going to need to. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning, and Mia Carter had never backed down from a fight in her life. The meeting room was empty, the last executives having left just minutes ago after approving Project Prometheus. The air still vibrated with the tension from the confrontation between Mia and Dorothy, but now there was something else, a different electricity, more dangerous, pulsing between her and Liam. Mia remained standing by the panoramic windows, watching Manhattan's lights twinkle like fallen stars, but her mind was completely focused on the man behind her. She could feel him approaching without needing to turn around, her body reacting instinctively to his proximity. You were incredible today, Liam said, his voice low and loaded with admiration. The way you handled Dorothy, it was devastating. Mia turned slowly, and what she saw in his eyes made her lose her breath. It wasn't just professional pride or satisfaction from the victory. It was something much more primitive, much more dangerous. It was pure desire, mixed with an admiration that bordered on worship. She won't give up, Mia said, but her voice was huskier than intended. The adrenaline from the confrontation still ran through her veins, mixing with acute awareness of his presence. No, he agreed, approaching until he was just steps away from her. But that means you'll have to work even closer to me. Constant supervision. The way he said constant supervision made something tighten in Mia's stomach. There were layers of meaning in those words, silent promises that made her pulse quicken. How close? She asked, her tone deliberately provocative. In response, he closed the distance between them, stopping when he was so close she could feel the heat emanating from his body, could see the small golden flecks in his dark eyes. Close enough for me to protect you, he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. Close enough that no one will question why I spend so much time making sure you're safe. Safe, she repeated, and there was a note of challenge in her voice. I don't feel the least bit safe when I'm near you. Why? His eyes darkened with an intensity that made her tremble. Because you make me want to break all the rules, she admitted, her words little more than a whisper. What rules? He moved even closer, until their bodies almost touched. The ones that say we shouldn't mix business with pleasure, the ones that say this is dangerous, the ones that say we could lose everything. What if I told you I don't care about the rules? His hands moved to hold her face, thumbs caressing her cheeks with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. Then I'd say you're a very dangerous man, Liam Sterling. And you? He leaned in until his lips almost touched hers. Do you care about the rules? Instead of answering with words, Mia rose on her tiptoes, eliminating the last distance between them. What rules? She whispered against his lips. The groan that escaped his throat was purely masculine, full of need and approval. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her against him with an urgency that spoke of weeks of forced restraint. You won today, he murmured, his lips brushing against her ear. "You were magnificent, powerful, absolutely devastating, and I've never wanted you more in my life." His words sent waves of heat through her body. "Liam, do you have any idea how hard it was to sit at that table, watching you destroy Dorothy with pure intelligence and strength, and not be able to touch you?" His voice was loaded with a sexual tension that made her feel like she was on fire. "Then touch me now," she challenged, her hands moving to his tie, slowly loosening it. "Mia," he said, but there was less resistance in his voice than before. "We're in the office. Someone might... The meeting's over. Everyone's gone. Dorothy left furious and won't be back today." Her hands moved to the buttons of his shirt. "And I want you now, here." The raw confession seemed to break his last thread of resistance. With a quick movement, he lifted her and placed her on the mahogany table, positioning himself between her legs. "You're going to be my ruin," he murmured against her lips. "And you're going to be mine," she replied, pulling him into a kiss that was anything but gentle. It was pure hunger. Weeks of tension, stolen touches, glances loaded with promises finally exploded in a passion that consumed them completely. Her hands were in his hair, undoing his professional styling, while his explored every curve of her body through the silk of her blouse. "You're addictive," he groaned against her neck, his teeth gently nibbling the sensitive skin. "Since that first presentation, you're all I can think about." "Good," she gasped when he found a particularly sensitive spot, "because you consume me completely." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes, and what she saw there made her shiver. It wasn't just desire. It was possessiveness, admiration, and something that looked suspiciously like worship. "Do you know what you did to me today?" he asked, his hands holding her face. "Watching you face Dorothy, seeing you be so powerful, so brilliant." "What did I do?" she whispered. "Made me fall in love with you even more. Made me realize that I don't just desire you, I admire you, I respect you. I love you in a way I never thought was possible." His words hit her like a wave, and she felt tears sting her eyes. "Liam." "No," he interrupted gently. "Let me say this. You're not just the woman I love. You're my equal, my partner, the person who makes me want to be better. You're perfect as you are," she said, her hands caressing his face. "No," he smiled, "but with you I can be." He kissed her again, and this time it was different. It wasn't just passion, it was promise. It was commitment. It was the physical expression of feelings that went beyond words. When they finally separated, both were breathless, their foreheads touching. "This is madness," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed. "Dorothy will use this against us if she finds out." "Let her try," Mia said, and there was fierce determination in her voice. "I won't hide anymore. I won't pretend you don't mean everything to me." "Everything?" He raised an eyebrow. "Everything," she confirmed without hesitation. "You're my obsession, my inspiration, my ruin and my salvation, all at the same time." "God, I love you," he murmured, kissing her again with a tenderness that contrasted with the passion of moments before. "And I love you," she replied. "More than I should. More than is safe. More than is sensible." "Then we're both crazy," he said, smiling against her lips. "Apparently," she laughed softly. They remained like that for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. It wasn't just about the kiss, or about finally admitting their feelings openly. It was about the conscious decision to stop hiding, to stop pretending that what was between them was just professional. "What do we do now?" she asked finally. "Now," he said, helping her down from the table, "we go home. Together. And tomorrow, we face whatever comes." "Together," she repeated, and there was something powerful in the simple word. "Together," he confirmed, intertwining his fingers with hers. As they left the meeting room hand in hand, Mia knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Dorothy Mitchell had declared war, and now Liam and she had given her the perfect ammunition. But looking at the man beside her, seeing the determination in his eyes, Mia felt only one thing: hope. Because if they were going to face a storm, at least they would face it together. And together they were invincible. The war was far from over, but the most important battle had already been won. the battle for each other's hearts. Monday arrived like an inevitable storm. Mia entered Sterling Corp's lobby with her heart racing, very aware that everything had changed in the weekend she spent in Liam's arms. There was no more pretending they were just professional colleagues. Not after the whispered words of love in the early morning hours. Not after the promises murmured against each other's skin. Not after discovering they fit together with a perfection that defied all logic. But now, under the fluorescent lights of the corporate environment, reality hit with full force. The elevator to the 22nd floor had never seemed so long. When the doors opened, Mia took a deep breath and entered the hallway leading to her office, very aware of the glances that followed her. Was it paranoia on her part, or was there really something different in the way people watched her? "Mia!" Jennifer from HR's voice made her freeze. "Could you come to my office for a moment?" The tone was too casual, too forced. Mia felt her stomach tighten as she followed Jennifer down the hallway, her mind racing with possibilities. Had Dorothy said something? Were there rumors circulating? Jennifer's office was small but efficient, with plants trying to soften the cold corporate atmosphere. Jennifer closed the door behind them, and Mia immediately knew she was in trouble. "Please have a seat," Jennifer said, her voice losing all feigned cordiality. "I've received some concerns about your professional conduct." "What kind of concerns?" Mia asked, keeping her voice steady despite growing panic. "Inappropriate relationships with superiors, using personal influence to advance professionally, conflicts of interest that could compromise the company's integrity." Each accusation fell like a hammer blow. Dorothy had struck, and struck fast. "May I know who made these accusations?" Mia asked. "That's not relevant," Jennifer replied, but the flush in her cheeks betrayed that she was uncomfortable with the situation. "What's relevant is that the company has very clear policies about relationships between employees at different hierarchical levels." "And if I said these accusations are unfounded?" Jennifer sighed. "Mia, you're a talented employee. No one is questioning your abilities, but the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety." The appearance of impropriety. Mia almost laughed at the irony. If Jennifer only knew how far from mere appearance they had gone. "What exactly are you suggesting? That you be more discreet in your professional interactions, avoid unnecessary meetings in private settings, keep communications strictly by email when possible. You understand?" Mia understood perfectly. It was a veiled warning to stay away from Liam, to cut the ties that had become the most important thing in her life. "And if I refuse to alter my professional conduct based on unfounded gossip?" Mia asked, her tone gaining a dangerous edge. Jennifer studied her for a long moment. "Then I suggest you carefully consider whether you want this to go to the legal department." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Mia stood slowly, her dignity intact, even as her world seemed to crumble. "Thank you for the warning," she said, her voice icy. "I'll carefully consider my options." She left Jennifer's office with her head high, but inside she was in free fall. Dorothy had played her first real move, and it had been dead on target. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of tension. Colleagues who used to greet her warmly now just nodded politely. Conversations ceased when she passed by. The climate had changed, and everyone seemed to know something she officially wasn't supposed to know they knew. It was almost noon when she finally saw Liam. He was leaving a meeting surrounded by executives when their eyes met in the hallway. For a fraction of a second, she saw the same warmth, the same intimacy that had been in his eyes during the weekend. But then the professional mask descended, and he nodded briefly before continuing his conversation with colleagues. The casual gesture hit her like a slap. She knew he was just being professional, protecting them both, but it still hurt to see how easily he could hide what was between them. At 3 in the afternoon, when she was buried in code, trying to distract herself from the emotional storm, her phone vibrated with a text message. "Conference room 3. Now. LS." Her heart raced. It was the first direct communication they'd had since arriving at the office, and its formality made her shiver. Conference room 3 was small and discreet, located at the end of a less busy hallway. When Mia entered, Liam was already there, standing by the window, his posture tense. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She obeyed, the click of the lock echoing in the silence like a gunshot. "Jennifer talked to me too," he said finally, turning to face her. Dorothy went to the legal department. The words confirmed her worst fears. What exactly did she say? That there's evidence of an inappropriate relationship between us, that you're receiving preferential treatment, that the company's integrity is compromised. And you? What did you say? Liam ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she had learned to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. I denied any professional impropriety, said your qualifications speak for themselves, and that any success you've had was based on pure merit. That's all? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the internal struggle in his eyes. What else could I say, Mia? That they're right? That I'm in love with my employee and it's compromised my professional judgment? The raw way he said it made her recoil as if she'd been physically hit. Is your professional judgment compromised? Not about your work, he said quickly. Never about your work. You're brilliant, talented, deserve every opportunity you've had. But can I honestly say my decisions about the project weren't influenced by my feelings for you? Can I swear that every extra meeting, every individual supervision session was purely professional? The silence that followed was deafening. They both knew the answer. So what do we do? She asked finally, her voice small. Liam approached her, and when he spoke, his voice was loaded with pain. Maybe we need to step back, professionally, create some distance until things calm down. Distance, she repeated, and the word sounded like a death sentence. Not forever, he said quickly, his hands moving as if wanting to touch her, but stopping in the air between them. Just until we can figure out a way to make this work without destroying our careers. And if we can't figure it out? The question hung in the air between them like a guillotine. Liam looked at her for a long moment, and she saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. Then we'll have to make a choice, he said softly, between work and us. Mia felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. She had fought her entire life to get where she was, had sacrificed relationships, social opportunities, pieces of herself to build her career, and now she was being forced to choose between that career and the man she loved. This isn't fair, she whispered. No, he agreed, and there was cold anger in his voice. It's not. But Dorothy made sure we don't have a choice. So she won. She won this battle, Liam corrected, approaching until he stood directly in front of her. But not the war. How can you be so sure? Instead of answering with words, he finally gave in to impulse and touched her, his hands holding her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the tension in the air. Because I'm not giving up on you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I may have to be more careful, more strategic, but I'm not giving up on us. Liam, no, he interrupted her, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. You changed my life, Mia. You made me feel things I didn't know were possible. And if Dorothy thinks she can use corporate politics to separate us, she doesn't know me as well as she thinks. The conviction in his voice made her believe, at least for a moment, that maybe there was a way out. What if we have to choose? She asked. His eyes darkened with an intensity that made her shiver. Then we choose each other. You would leave Sterling Corp? I'd leave anything for you, he said without hesitation. The question is, would you? Mia looked at the man who had become her entire world, weighing the question that would define the rest of her life. Her career, her dreams, her ambition, everything she had fought for, hung in the balance. But when she looked into his eyes, when she felt the love radiating from him in almost tangible waves, she knew the answer had been obvious from the beginning. Yes, she whispered, I'd leave everything for you. The relief that passed across his face was almost palpable. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that was more promise than passion. It won't come to that, he murmured against her lips. I'll find a way to protect us. Both of us. How? He smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. Leave that to me. Dorothy may have won this round, but the game is far from over. As they left the room separately, Mia, 5 minutes later, she wondered if she was being naive to believe there was a happy ending to their situation. But when she returned to work, trying to maintain normalcy while her world fell apart, a new message appeared on her screen. Tonight, my apartment. We have a lot to discuss. And Mia, wear something that can easily be removed. L. Despite all the tension, despite all the problems, she smiled. The war might just be beginning, but at least they would face it together. And together, they were a force that Dorothy Mitchell had yet to learn to fear. But she would learn soon enough. Sometimes the most impossible promises are the ones that shape our destiny. Mia had sworn at 17 that she would marry a man who didn't even know she existed. 8 years later, she had not only won his heart, but discovered that true love doesn't follow schedules or corporate rules. She discovered that when two souls recognize each other, neither time nor obstacles can separate them. Because in the end, it's not dreams that transform us, it's the courage to pursue them even when the whole world says it's impossible. And perhaps deep down, this story also speaks about the most courageous version of ourselves, the one that dares to promise the impossible and then moves mountains to fulfill it. If this story touched you, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to continue bringing stories that touch the heart and awaken the courage to dream big.